Hi, everybody. My name is GK Noasu. I'd just like to thank you for reviewing my presentation here for the 2021 CSRI Virtual Conference on College Sport. As you can see, it is titled Examining Factors Influencing NCAA Division I Conference Realignment. So we'll talk a little bit about that today, kind of the historical aspects of college athletics, the NCAA, athletic conferences, kind of their role. Then we'll talk a little bit more in detail about the research that was done on this. Okay, and as I mentioned here, we'll just have a brief overview to get us started. I'll go through the methodology, results, findings. We won't have much time for discussion today, at least on a two-way avenue, but I will be able to kind of just provide some of the talking points that arose from this research. Then I'll also have my contact information towards the end of this presentation in case you want to reach out to me and get any more information on this study or any research I'm working on or conference realignment, anything like that. Okay, so when we talk about conference realignment, what that essentially is that we're talking about is NCAA athletic conferences and then member institutions, kind of the relationship that they form together, how they operate together, how they maximize interest together, and what we've seen through history, and particularly probably in the last 30 years or so, we've seen a lot of realignment where schools are going to different athletic conferences, and by the same token, athletic conferences are taking on some different schools, and each of those waves of realignment, if you will, kind of serve a purpose for both the institution and the conference. Most of this research is focused on the institution's standpoint of it, but there certainly are some parallels when looking from the conference perspective as well. So here we have three waves of conference realignment, and we'll get into that as we move furthermore into the research here. But essentially, we can pinpoint three waves of realignment from 1990 to 1996, 2003 to 2005, and 2010 to 2014. We've seen that there are some different factors that kind of influence this realignment. There's some different historical pieces and historical landmarks that led to realignment. So kind of the factors that influence realignment, which the literature initially suggested, was athletic prestige, academic prestige, competitive balance, revenue, team travel, exposure to fan and alumni bases. And each of those things we'll talk about in a little bit more detail as we move through the presentation here, and get some definition to really operationalize those terms for you. And then the final kind of piece here is principal agent theory. That seems to be an appropriate framework to evaluate this research, examine this research in. Essentially, principal agent theory highlights how two entities or one or more entities, kind of the relationship that they have to benefit from each other or make sure that each other's interests are in line with each other. And we'll get into that a little bit more as well as we move through the presentation. Okay, and here is a diagram of a principal agent theory that I mentioned just a moment ago. As you can see here, kind of the two central players here are the conference, the agent in this scenario, and the member institution, the principal in this scenario. Essentially, the principal, the member institution in this case, is looking for the conference to help ensure that some different interests are reached. Some of those interests, as I mentioned, could be those factors I mentioned earlier, competitive balance, revenue, academic prestige. And then, of course, the conference is also expecting some interest to be met from the member institution as well. So whether that's a highly selective or highly academic athletic conference, they'd want their member institutions to kind of reflect that standard of high achieving academics. So those are kind of in a brief nutshell, those are kind of the interests that align that each side is looking for. And again, I think the principal agent theory did a really good job of allowing us to contextualize and understand kind of this relationship between conferences and institutions. Each side is looking to maximize their interest with the help of the other side. As long as these interests align, the relationship works out. It aligns for both parties. in some cases when, there's maybe information that one side has and the other side doesn't, or if the interests aren't in alignment, then we can start to see some sort of, in this case, you may see some realignment. Maybe the conference isn't doing as much for the member institution as the member institution thinks they should be doing, and the member institution maybe has some information that, you know, conference B might be a better fit for the school. So they may be influenced or incentivized to engage in realignment and join that other conference. Okay, and kind of what led me to this area of research is, we'll just go through the points here. The problem basically is that conferences and their member institutions have historically enjoyed stable long-term relationships. That's been the case, since the 1900s, when 1900 the NCAA was formed. And that's not to say that there wasn't any movement from 1900 until 1990s. There had been movement, but for the most part, it had been pretty stable, relatively stable. It was only until, like I mentioned, about 1996, that first wave, when we started seeing, realignment kind of going rapidly. And then there's the second wave I mentioned, 2003 to 05, and then the kind of the final mass wave was 2010 to 2014. And currently in college athletics, we are seeing kind of a shift in the landscape. There's different things such as student athlete well-being that are taking a bigger focus. There's the ability for student athletes to kind of make some compensation off their name, image, and likeness. So those things of that nature are in play, and they seem like they may be at the forefront of a potential next wave of realignment. So I think this current study kind of frames factors that influence realignment, as mentioned, and kind of sets the table for what we may expect to see, here in the next few years. A lot of the television contracts, for instance, are up with a lot of the different conferences and networks and schools. So that may be a point of contention for realignment if a conference is able to, let's say, make a deal with ESPN, so to speak. Large revenue coming in. Maybe that may be a motivation for a school to leave one conference and go to another. And of course, that's just one example of the factors that influence realignment. There will be more that we'll discuss as we go throughout this presentation again. And then kind of just a brief overview of the purpose here. We really to determine what factors incentivize realignment, determine if there's some factors that serve more of incentive than others. Really, we want to understand this through the perceptions of institutional administrators that really oversee the university and athletics, kind of on the strategic level. And then just to kind of highlight the same, so we just hope to understand what influences realignment, hopefully provide some programmatic implications for future realignment if that occurs, and helps to understand the strategic process of conference realignment. Okay, and there was 4 research questions that led this research here. I won't go through each and every one, but you can kind of see them here. And to the right is the analysis that aligns with each research question. So this was just a nice little framework to kind of help align analysis, question, really contextualize everything, and make it nice and neat, and kind of set a roadmap for where we're going in the study. Okay, and just a brief overview of the methodology. Of course, because I was dealing with human subjects, speaking to administrators at NCAA Division I universities across the country, I did go through the institutional review process at UNLV, University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Created a survey. It was a 35-item survey, and it was based on literature in the area of intercollegiate athletics, the literature I could find on conference membership, not necessarily realignment, but membership. There was some realignment literature, not very much, but I did find, did get into some literature that discussed college athletics, athletic conference membership, athletic and university leadership. So that really allowed me to get an idea of what research is out there, what maybe should drive this survey, and of course that was in tandem with a principal agent theory as well. And once I was able to put together this survey, went through content validity, construct validity, all those things to ensure that we do have a robust, accurate, representative survey. I was able to speak to some different folks in the higher education community and intercollegiate athletics community who serve kind of as an expert panel, just to ensure that everything that was being discussed in the survey is reflective of what was going on in the landscape. Participant identification, as I mentioned, I was able to reach out to presidents, athletic directors, senior women administrators, which is the a top-level senior position for women at athletic programs across the country that the NCAA mandates. I was able to reach out to them, and then finally was able to reach out to faculty athletic representatives who kind of just serve as the liaison, so to speak, between kind of the faculty and academic side of a university and the athletic side of the university. Data collection, the survey was sent out over a period of 6 weeks. 6 weeks to, again, all the administrators that I mentioned. We didn't have a high response rate, which I'll get into a little bit later. We did have enough responses to run an exploratory factor analysis, which is kind of the driving analysis of this study. Okay, and speaking of exploratory factor analysis, here's just some the parameters that were used and implemented. Again, I won't go into each one in detail. Just leave that for you to take a look at. And if you have questions about any of this this process, you can certainly reach out to me via email or phone. I'll have that information towards the end of the presentation. Okay, and then we also conducted paired samples t-test. This was gave me the ability to kind of identify which factors are most important, so to speak. So we're able just to compare the different permutations of the factors to see really which ones were kind of rising to the top, so to speak, to see which ones were seemed to be most influential, most important. And again, I won't go line by line here, but you can get an idea of the different parameters that were implemented for this. Okay, and results of the study, as I mentioned, we had a pretty a lower response rate than anticipated, but again, there's still enough folks to run the factor analysis, which was again the basis of this study. The participant profile, really quickly here, you can see about 6% of presidents responded, about 11% of our athletic directors, 13% of our SWAs, and our FARs, 16.5%, 17%. And then just to provide some further context, one of the questions on the survey or survey items was asking folks if your school realigned in this time frame here, 2010 to 2014, and nearly half of the schools that responded indicated that yes, they did realign between this period here. The survey included representation from all conferences. There's 31, 32 athletic conferences, including independents who all responded, and kept into schools that don't have an athletic conference but go by the independent designation. I kind of grouped them together for the purposes of just kind of this analysis here. And then item analysis below here, the highest rated survey item was overall athletic quality of conference. So essentially you're asking folks if how influential or does overall athletic quality of conference incentivize conference realignment? And same for the lack of national champions won by member institutions. So essentially, folks, the highest rated item here is saying the athletic quality of the conference, is really an incentive for realignment. And then lack of national champions won by member institutions. That doesn't really seem to be an incentive or an influence for realignment. So to say that if school A is looking to athletic conference Z, and evaluating that, the school wouldn't necessarily look and say, oh well, that conference hasn't produced national championships in whatever sports. So we're not going to go there. That doesn't appear to be the case with this research here, these results. Okay, and here's the research question number one. What factors serve as incentives for institutions to consider a change in conference realignment? And again, the factor analysis helped to really address this question here. Here are kind of the line item results here. I won't go into detail line by line, but of course I will be available for questions or answers via email or telephone. Okay, and kind of the results here. What emerged is that we found that there's 6 factors that really seem to influence conference realignment. Market is essentially, the geographic footprint of the athletic conference. So, let's just say, the Mountain West Conference is a conference, as the name suggests, covers a lot of the kind of the Rocky Mountain states or region of the country. So one would expect that schools who are in that conference are in this region and in that region, excuse me. And that's kind of that market aspect area, just being able to have that brand and that access with fans and alumni folks and media really in the given area. Revenue, of course, is it's revenue from television. ESPN or Fox or whoever it may be may have a contract with a particular athletic conference, and there's revenue generated from there. There's also revenue generated from merchandise or championship memorabilia merchandise and gate receipts from ticket sales, and all those are related to kind of the makeup of the conference. If there's two, 3, 4, really good teams, schools that will be competing against each other, that appears to be a little bit more desirable than, if it's, one really good school, whether that's academics or athletics, and, that's always at the top of the mountain. Competitive balance is related to that. Really, it appears that there should be, some level of parity, or parity is desired, or parity influences realignment. There's some level of parity there. Team travel, again, similar to the market factor, but team travel is really talking more so about the proximity of schools to their conference peers. Academic prestige is, as you might imagine by the sound of it, just kind of the academic profile of an institution. And athletic prestige, similar, is the athletic profile of the institution and conferences, excuse me. And you can see here on the right, they're all each factor pretty much held its own as a homogeneous concept. You can see the coefficients here, the Cronbach alpha coefficient on the right are all well above the established cutoff, and you see some very high coefficients as well. Okay. And then research question 2, do some of these factors serve as more of an incentive for an institution to consider a change in athletic conference affiliation than others? Again, here are the parameters that were put in place to ensure that we are, getting accurate results. Again, won't go through each and every one, but you can kind of take a look there, get a little snapshot of that. And it did appear that we do have some factors that seem to be more of an incentive than others. Most of these are that mid to high 3 level. We obviously have this competitive balance here at 2.95, which suggests competitive balance doesn't really serve, or it doesn't serve as much as an incentive as the others, and certainly doesn't serve as much of an incentive as revenue. You can see our standard deviations here to the right. We do have quite a bit of variation, which would suggest that maybe not all folks, the 148 folks who participated in this, um, saw each of these factors equally or as impactful. Okay, and we can see here just a follow up to the previous slide. Again, question 2: do some factors serve as more of an incentive than others? And you can kind of see how they stack up here um, in terms of mean, our t-test, our significance, and our effect size. You can see revenue. Revenue seems to be, again, the most important or most influential factor. Okay, and then the third research question, I just wanted to take a look to see, how this broke down by administrator type. Again, we have presidents, athletic directors, senior women administrators, and faculty athletic representatives. And you can see here they were all, presidents and athletic directors seem to be pretty consistent across the board. Of course, there's a little bit higher rankings, I would say, or not that I would say, but that the results show a little bit higher rankings for presidents over athletic directors, but pretty much the same, similar structure. And then the same for senior women administrators and faculty athletic representatives. We're kind of seeing that same distribution or same factors, and almost in the same, actually in the same exact order. So. Okay, and then this is, of course, just kind of a follow-up. This helps to cement, um, which factors are the most important based on the perceptions of each of these participant groups. And again, as the previous slide alluded to, presidents and athletic directors seem to be aligned on the same items, team travel, and then senior women administrators and faculty athletic representatives are aligned on the same revenue. Okay, so our overall findings, again, we have 6 factors that emerged that seem to incentivize institutions to engage in conference realignment. Some are more of incentive than others, as we just reviewed. And again, it appears that institutional administrator type does influence responses. We saw presidents and athletic directors were pretty solid on the revenue factor being the influence, and then faculty athletic representatives and senior women administrators were not so much on that side. And one of the things that was pretty cool that emerged is market wasn't necessarily it wasn't a factor at all going into this research. It's not something that I had thought of, and it's actually something that it was a factor that emerged by the 2 other factors kind of collapsed and created this market factor. And you can kind of see the items that are associated with market, the survey items that are associated with market, and they all have to do, again, as the name implies, kind of that connection to fan or alumni base, or having a presence in a certain area in a certain region, or even kind of impacting the brand of the institution. And then here you can kind of see the breakdown of each of the other factors and kind of where the items seemed to load and align with. Okay, then this is kind of just a really, really high level overview of some of these different factors, um, some of the items that are representative, or maybe even like a summary that's representative of each of these factors. And as you can see here, it is supported by the results are supported by the literature, excuse me, which helped us to produce and find these, make these connections. Okay, and the fourth and final research question was really just looking at how principal agent theory helps to explain the relationship between institutions and athletic conferences. And based on the explanation I had provided at the top of the research, and as we kind of went through the results and the findings, it does appear that this is a pretty strong framework that helps to explain conference realignment. As you can see here, it suggests when parties engage in an agency agreement, there's some incentive in place so the interests are aligned and tasks are executed. And that's really what the results seem to show. The different factors, whether that's revenue, team travel, market, those did seem to serve as an incentive for the institution to align with the conference and the conference to align with the institution. Although this was research was more focused on the institutional side of it, it really seemed to emerge that those factors help to align those tasks and interests, or those are the tasks and interests that make the relationship beneficial between conference and institution. And of course, there are some limitations, as there are in any study. This is a pretty substantive list of the limitations that were experienced in this study. We'll just leave that there quickly, just in case there's any notes or anything you want to ask about that when we get towards the end of the study here, or the presentation, excuse me. Okay, and we just have some implications for and future research here. I think out of all these, they're all important, but one of the things that really emerged from the literature and kind of the landscape of college athletics right now is this fourth one: is the relevance of factors. A new wave of realignment may be imminent. As I mentioned, there's television rights that are coming up for most, if not all, conferences within the next 2 to 5 years. There's different, name, image, and likeness of student athletes. There's well-being of student athletes, whether that's kind of the social justice or obviously COVID or concussion protocols. How are those things, or will those things, how would they affect conference affiliation if another conference seems to be really progressive in those areas? Would a school be willing to leave their current conference to go to a different conference that is really progressive and is really addressing each of those areas? Like I mentioned, the new television revenue, student athlete well-being, name, image, and likeness for student athletes, those type of things. And that about sums up the presentation for today. Here's my contact information if you like to reach out or have any other questions about kind of the research, or how I got to really just take an interest in studying all that. So I'll leave this information up here briefly. I really do appreciate your time and you taking some time to take a look at my presentation here. Thank you.